I can't... why do I do this to myself? This is abhorrent cinematic garbage. Okay, so... I've seen a lot of these bad Christian movies. I've been watching them as an ironic form of entertainment for a while, maybe around the time that, like, Fireproof with Kirk Cameron came out, and I saw that there was this, like, new genre of Christian film. And when I say Christian film, it's a very specific type of Christianity that these films are pushing. It's specifically evangelical, Protestant, United States, politically conservative Christian. And I find that these movies, if they're bad, and they're all bad that I've seen, I haven't seen a good one. The least bad one I've seen is The Christmas Candle, since this wave came out. But most of them are well, almost all of them, 99% of them, 99.9% of them are horrible. And they fall into three categories of horrible. It's ineptly made, so like not to the level of a normal professional film. Intellectually reprehensible, which is that they're making arguments for Christianity and against either atheism or a different religion, and they use like straw man arguments or logical fallacies or whatever, or they just completely ignore things in them. Like God's Not Dead 2 takes place during a court case, and it just doesn't know how the legal system works, or the Constitution, or anything, and it preys on the audience's own ignorance to get away with making its bad arguments. And then there's morally reprehensible, where the film is just making a message or an argument that is just ethically wrong. And the worst of the movies, like the two God's Not Dead movies, they're all three. And then some movies are just one or two of them. So, I just got back from my own private 10:30 screening of Let There Be Light, the latest of these Christian movies. This one wasn't released by PureFlix, it was released by Atlas Distribution, a company that, as far as I know, has only released Dinesh D'Souza documentaries and the Atlas Shrugged movies. I think they've probably done some other conservative stuff. So, you know, I don't have a lot of time to write written reviews anymore, but the ones that always got the most hits on my movie review blog were when I wrote about Christian movies, so I'll put some links to some of them below. The last one I saw was The Case for Christ. That one was a bit better made. I wouldn't call that ineptly made. It's not really morally reprehensible. That was just a movie that was purely intellectually reprehensible. It just made really bad arguments and ignored the badness of their own arguments. So, Let There Be Light, a movie that is starring and directed by Kevin Sorbo. Kevin Sorbo, he originally became famous when he did that Hercules the Legendary Journey syndicated television show in the 90s. Lately, his career is just Christian stuff, or making like appearances on Fox News. And he played a evil, strawman atheist villain of God's Not Dead, and that movie has sort of defined his latter Christian career. So, in this movie, he's basically doing a different version of that same character. The movie begins with a Christian rap song, always good, and the Twin Towers with 9/11. Yeah, can't make that up. Basically, the opening credits of this movie, aside from the Christian rap, it's all shots of real-life aftermath of Muslim terrorism. So you get the Twin Towers, you get the Boston Marathon, you get the people of France during after the Charlie Hebdo thing and some other stuff. And at first I'm like, is this just going to be an anti-Muslim movie? I thought this was an anti-atheist movie. And then once the movie begins, you're still not sure why that was the opening credits, and you get a little bit of an explanation why later. So, Kevin Sorbo plays this guy, Dr. Harkins, a name that is meant to be a little bit off from Dawkins, obviously, for Richard Dawkins. And this Harkins character, first of all, he's a doctor. The movie never tells us what. Does he have a PhD? Is he a medical doctor? Is he a doctor of evolutionary biology, like Richard Dawkins is? It doesn't tell us. He's basically just a guy who's famous for writing books that bash God, and bash the Christian God specifically. We see posters in the guy's apartment with titles like the God virus, or my favorite, a little in-joke that it actually made me chuckle was Hercules, more real than God. So you see Kevin Sorbo's face and then Hercules, and that was pretty funny. That was probably the only intentional. No, there's 2 intentional jokes in this movie I laughed at, and I'll talk about the other one later. Everything else was unintentional that I laughed at. So this atheist character that he's playing is kind of a mix of the worst personality traits of a few famous atheists. So he has the condescension of Richard Dawkins, he has the raging alcoholism of Christopher Hitchens, and then he has sort of the hard partying playboy bacchanalia braggadocio of a Bill Maher, someone who goes the Playboy Mansion and hangs out with bimbos and stuff. So he's kind of just a mix of all these different, the negative caricature aspects of these real people. So he's written a book called, get this title, Aborting God, which I'm upset about because he totally stole my autobiography's title. I'm joking, of course. My autobiography eventually will be titled Ronald Reagan Sucks Cocks in Hell, because I figure that is the single most offensive thing I can title a book that would upset conservatives. But regardless, Aborting God, which is a funny title. And he's debating some other Christian, and the debate is, whenever Christians write atheists debating, they don't know how to do it. Whether it's God's Not Dead or whether it's A Matter of Faith by the Cristiano Brothers, they don't seem to know how to write an atheist debating, which is odd because there's plenty of videos on YouTube of atheists debating Christians. There was that Ken Ham Bill Nye one that was, there's a lot of them out there, so they could easily just watch one of those and pick up some stuff. But the problem is they don't want to deal with strong arguments and then attempt to refute strong arguments. They just kind of want to deal in personality stuff. So during this thing, the Christian just kind of quotes the Bible. Argument's not very good. When Christians are good at those kind of debates, it's usually because they step away from saying, well, the Bible says this, the Bible says this, the Bible says this, and they go more into different philosophical stuff. And I don't think the arguments are good, obviously, but they're at least better than saying, well, the Bible says this, so it's obviously true. What are you talking about? And then the Sorbo atheist guy, his response is sort of just to be a condescending jerk. And look, I get it. I can be a condescending jerk when I'm talking about religion. Other atheists can be condescending jerk. I get it, but you can't make an entire argument out of just being a condescending jerk. So he does a thing where he's saying period, comma, quote, X. He's basically speaking out grammar as a way of attacking the Christian. And I guess they're having it in this lecture hall at a college, I guess, and based on the audience of this thing, the entire audience is on the Kevin Sorbo character side. They're cheering him on and all this stuff, and anytime you've watched any of these debates, it's usually split about half and half. It's usually Christians and atheists both come up. I've never seen one of these debates where only atheists showed up in the audience. And Kevin Sorbo's character's argument is just to be an asshole, and then he talks about how his son died of cancer, and so God would be an asshole for doing that. So I get the argument. It's sort of the problem, a mix of the problem of evil argument and the why do bad things happen to good people argument, which can be made in a valid way. I do find both of those arguments to be fairly valid against existence of the Christian God. But when Christians make these movies, they confuse people who are angry with God with people who just don't believe God exists. They seem to assume that atheists actually do believe in God, they just think God's an asshole. And there's an argument to be made about, hey, if the God of the Old and New Testament actually existed, would that be a God worth worshipping? Would that God be a piece of shit? But that's a different argument. The whole debate they're having at this point in the movie is about just the existence of God. And in real life, it tends to be the case that Christians like to jump from different argument to different argument because they can't sustain one completely, but, you know, the movie just kind of doesn't go into that. So, but yeah, so the Sorbo character, he has 3 kids in the movie. One of them died of cancer. So after the kid died of cancer, I guess Sorbo became a raging atheist. I don't know if he was an atheist before, the movie doesn't tell us that. And then he became, like, hard drinking alcohol, he divorced his wife and all this stuff. So, we're introduced to Sorbo's family. I'd have to double-check this at some point, but I'm pretty sure his ex-wife is played by Sorbo's real-life wife, and his 2 living kids, at the very least, are played by his real-life children. The kids cannot act. I don't want to pick on them much because they're children, but they really cannot fucking act. And, look, if you're a non-professional filmmaker, and you just want to make a movie, then yeah, it's okay to get your family and your friends who can't act in it together because you're doing it for fun. This is a movie that's released in theaters. This is a movie that has distribution that probably had a budget at least in the hundreds of thousands, even if it didn't crack the millions. I don't know what this movie cost. Get professional actors. I mean, if your kids can act, great. These kids cannot act. Now, alright, Kevin Sorbo... Admittedly, Kevin Sorbo is sometimes at least a decent actor. Oddly enough, he's better at playing the condescending atheist than he is at later in the movie when he becomes a Christian. He's actually a better actor playing angry. I guess Sorbo should just kind of play angry. Which is odd, because the Hercules character he played wasn't angry, he was a hero. But anyway, so... You know, his ex-wife and his kids are all super Christian, so they hate the fact that the Sorbo character is, like, bringing up the dead son to, like, sell books and whatever. So their relationship's not good. So then one night it cuts to, you know, the Aborting God book party. You know, Sorbo's character's out with, like, some Russian model who can't pronounce words right. Haha, funny. And, alright. So the guy who plays Sorbo's character's publicist is Daniel Roebuck. And he's a pretty talented comedic actor. He played Jay Leno in the Late Shift movie. He had a funny small role on Lost. He ends up blowing up. In this movie, he puts on one of the worst English accents I've heard in a long time. And he's playing basically this, like, this conservative Christian's concept of an effete British Hollywood type. And it's grating. Daniel, I don't know what Daniel Roebuck was thinking. He's usually a good actor. Why is he in this movie? Why is he doing this thing? I don't know. I don't know. But he's at this book release party, and Sorbo's character is just tossing back drink after drink. I mean, these Christian movies are never subtle. It's like in order for us to know that this character is drunk, the movie didn't have to do this much work. But he's tossing back, he's like doing like 2 glasses of champagne at one time. He's having 2 cocktails that are named after him. Later we see him driving, and while he's driving he's like swigging like from a flask of like scotch or something. And it's just like, I get it, movie, he's an alcoholic, he's drunk. So yeah, he's driving drunk and he has an accident. And all these Christian movies, they love car accidents. There's a car accident in God's Not Dead. There's a car accident in this Stephen Baldwin movie called God's Club. There's always car accidents in these movies. And these movies don't have the budget to show a car accident, so they always like fade to black or they do smash cut to black and then the car's upside down. So, and like that, this movie doesn't show the car accident. He's like driving into like a construction site or something, and then it cuts to black. And then we see really bad special effects. By that I'm saying a cross between an HP computer commercial and an amateur YouTuber who just got special effects software. Where Sorbo's character is in this tunnel of like old home movies, I guess, and then he sees his dead son materialize, and this dead son has horrible line delivery. And he, like, hugs his son. He's like, hey, Davey. And the kid's name's Davey. Davey, it's you. And then the kid's like, you have to go back. Let there be light. He actually delivers the line like that. Let there be light. Roll credits. It's Kevin Sorbo's kids can't act. So yeah, after that he's had this near-death experience, and that's what the movie's basically about. So you have this raging, condescending atheist. He has a near-death experience where he sees his dead son, and then he's like struggling. He's like having panic attacks. He's asking like his doctors. One of the doctors he asks is either Indian or Pakistani, which I think goes into like the anti-Muslim thread that kind of weaves throughout the movie. And she's like an atheist too, who likes his book, and she's like, oh well, there's when people have these near-death experiences, they're having a surge of brain activity and stuff. So he gets the Reader's Digest version of the scientific explanation for near-death experiences. And then as he's like struggling to be like, well, I saw my son, and one of my favorite lines is like, I've done acid, I know what hallucinations are like, this wasn't a hallucination. I should have said, this movie has really bad dialogue. And there's another point where earlier in the movie when Sorbo and his ex-wife are arguing, and he's like, oh, I need to cover your needs, but I'm paying enough in alimony, and she's like, I'm talking about our emotional needs, and it comes off really bad. Anyway, so Sorbo's had this near-death experience. He's starting to question whether there's an afterlife or not. And because of this, his ex-wife, who is devoutly Christian, starts hanging out with him more and is sort of trying to like walk him through this process and everything. And eventually she sends him to her pastor. Alright, so this pastor character, he is like straight out of central casting for mobster type. And he's basically like a Sopranos wannabe pastor. He's like, oh, I was a wise guy, and I spent time in jail, and I know a little bit about Italians. He actually says the phrase in the movie, bada bing. I don't know. So he goes to talk to this pastor, and the pastor's like, he was stuck in the hole with a Walkman. Do prisons give you a Walkman when you're in the hole? But they give him a Walkman and they give him a Bible. And he's like, the reason that he, it's like, I'm not one of these crafty people like your wife. I need evidence. I'm doing a bad Italian accent there. And he's like, I need evidence. And, okay, his evidence and his reason that he became a Christian is that the tomb was empty when Jesus, after Jesus was buried there. And he's like, there were no snitches, the disciples didn't turn, and they were tortured. The Romans, and they were Italians, and I know a little bit about Italians. And and so his idea is that Jesus' body disappeared, and that even after people were tortured and all this stuff, no one would give him up. So it's like, well, he obviously resurrected. And this is also a problem I have with these movies, and The Case for Christ did this a lot too, which is that the Christians in these movies will present New Testament stories as if they are widely accepted historical fact. That Jesus was a guy who was crucified, and then he was put in a tomb, and he resurrected. And the atheists in these movies, including in The Case for Christ, it's an atheist journalist whose goal is to look at all the evidence and disprove the resurrection of Christ. And in this movie, it's about the world's most famous atheist, which this movie calls the Sorbo character at least 7, if not 10 times. Like, the movie tells you this more than it needs to tell you this. It's like, I get who this character is supposed to be in the universe of this movie. Come on. But the Sorbo character thinks this over, is like, oh, I guess the tomb, no one turned up. And, he never makes the argument of, hey, maybe the New Testament isn't historically accurate. Maybe the 4 Gospels contradict themselves. Maybe books that were written at least 60 years after the supposed death of this man who may not have even existed might not be accurate. Maybe, aside from Josephus, there's no contemporaneous secular source that corroborates that this Jesus guy even existed. He could go into all of these arguments and then, this Christian and counter-arguments to this, but no. The atheists in the movies always accept the New Testament as historical fact. Always. Like, there's I don't know. it's as if Christians are sort of like, well, the Old Testament, sure, I can understand you call those fairy tales, manna from heaven, but the New Testament, that's just history. I don't know. So, and then we basically kind of just smash cut to Kevin Sorbo on his knees in, like, knee-level water, if that, while Pastor Bada Bing is pouring water on him and baptizing him with, like, this it's not really a gravy boat, it's like deeper than a gravy boat, but a gravy boat, while his ex-wife and his kids are like clapping along with him. And it's bad. Also, like, the Kevin Sorbo character throughout the movie is dressed kind of like I am, just not with the Stranger Things pin. He wears like all black while he's an alcoholic atheist, and then as soon as he becomes a born-again Christian, he starts wearing like light gray and some pastel colors, and it's like the movie, like, no subtlety. These movies have no subtlety. So Kevin Sorbo becomes a born-again Christian, like, overnight. I like that the Daniel Roebuck character, Norm, I think the character's name is, he's, like, Sorbo's character's publicist. And after he turns off, it's like, I can't sell books of this story with your christening and whatever, and he walks out. And in my head, I'm like, dude, any publicist or book publisher or anything else would see that, hey, this super atheist guy, the world's most famous atheist, becoming born again, he's like, I can't sell that? Yes, you can. Do you know how many Christians would eat up that book at the bookstore? I mean, the Case for Christ guy, he presented himself as an atheist reporter who suddenly became born again, and he makes money hand over fist selling his shitty books and being a pastor and everything. You can definitely sell. If Richard Dawkins came out today and said, "Hey, I'm sorry," this is even a worse British accent than Dan Roebuck does. "Hey, I'm sorry, God actually exists." That's Australian. That thing would sell 1 million fucking books to Christians, because they would be like, "Oh, I was right all along." They would buy that book hand over fist. In fact, if I were a less moral person, I would do that. I would be like, "Hey, I was this raging atheist communist, and now I'm a Christian. Give me money and go and book." I'd be a lot richer than I am now. Anyway, yeah, and then throughout this whole thing now, with Kevin Sorbo's character and the ex-wife character start, like, dating again. Not for very long, before, like, they end up, like, getting engaged again. I guess they just fell right back in there. So, during that whole thing, they come up with this idea of, and this is a fucking stupid idea. So, the idea is that, because the Davy, the dead son, said, "Let there be light," they're like, "What does that mean? What does that mean?" Oh, there's a funny part, too, where let there be light, and the Sorbo character, after he becomes born again, is talking with a reporter, and he holds up the LGBT, and the reporter's like, lesbian, trans, bi, so it's like a little stab at, like, diversity and stuff. So, anyway, their idea of making Let There Be Light a thing is that they're gonna make people on Christmas Eve hold up their cell phone flashlights, or I guess any sort of light. And the idea is that people can download an app so that they'll know a certain time to hold up their light in the sky. So that, and hopefully enough people will do this, that satellites will be able to see these lights from space. Which you'd need a lot of fucking cell phone flashlights to see it from fucking space. But that they'll do that, and it'll go all across the globe in synchronicity. Which, there's gotta be easier things to do to proselytize than that. But it wants to be all social media and hip like that. And then they'll also be able to, like, text something to donate food. I think Kevin Sorbo will feed them spiritually and physically. Horrible dialogue, I told you. And I always like that these movies talk about proselytizing as if the vast majority of people in the world, if not the United States, have never heard of Jesus or Christianity. At least 80% of the United States is Christian. The word is out on this Jesus guy. People have heard of him. Maybe they haven't heard about your specific niche interpretation of Christianity. this specifically evangelical, Protestant, King James only, politically conservative version, but they know what Jesus is. So they want to do that to get the word out on Jesus through this app in this thing, and it's a stupid fucking idea. But the Sorbo character, being an atheist, has burned most of the bridges in the Christian community, and so the Christians aren't willing to accept him, which is actually kind of a funny turn. Like, the original Christian he was debating at the beginning of the movie, we should see him on TV, and he's like, I'm forgiving, but it's going to take more than him saying he's Christian to be. It's like, movie kind of undercutting itself? I don't know. So, eventually, they end up on Sean Hannity. Sean Hannity, but is in the movie. He's also a producer of this movie. Now, I just want to take a little moment out. I'm recording this in early November. This past week, the week prior to when this video will be up, Sean Hannity has been talking to Roy Moore, the guy running for the Alabama Senate. Hey, Carl. Roy Moore, it's come out that he probably has attempted to initiate sexual relations with underage girls as young as 14. And Sean Hannity, before backtracking, he eventually backtracked, but before backtracking, he tried to argue that it was kind of okay for Roy Moore to hit on this 14-year-old because it was consensual. Now, apparently the age of consent in Alabama has been 16, so fine for the 16-year-olds, I guess, even though he was, I think, at the time of these allegations, Roy Moore was 2 years younger than I am now. So that it's fucking creepy. But you can't consent at 14. It doesn't. So, the fact that the Christian savior and hero of this movie is Sean Hannity doesn't play very well this week. I'm just saying. And this movie opened a couple weeks ago. I went back and forth about whether I wanted to see it and decided why the hell not tonight. Why the hell not? Why do I do this to myself? So eventually Sean Hannity is so popular around the world that he's able to get people all around the world to do this so that, like, entire continents light up from space. The movie even says twice, including North Korea. And Sean Hannity tries to play that off as a joke. He's like, how do they hear about me in North Korea? Yeah, so you're telling me enough people in North Korea, A, have cell phones, B, are secretly Christian, and C, will hold up their cell phone lights in such large amounts that that light will be visible from space. Movie, you're fucking stupid. So, and let me get into two different things. Alright, so Sorbo and his ex-wife, they get back together, he proposes to her again, fast, and they get, remarried. At the time they're announcing that they're going to get remarried to their two can't-act children. And then the wife has the worst on-screen seizure I've ever seen. Worst as in worst acted on-screen seizure. It's bad. The wife herself, she's an okay-ish actress. She's not good, but she's not terrible. She cannot act sick at all. So she has a seizure. And then they take her to the hospital where she has a nice Randy Travis-looking doctor this time, oncologist. Not that Pakistani one or whatever she was. And he tells her she has a disease, some sort of disorder that can lead to brain tumor cancers. And surprise, she has a brain tumor. These movies love giving people cancer. I don't know what it is. So she's got brain cancer. And then there's a montage of her, having cancer. And then on Christmas Eve night, when everyone's shining up their cell phone flashlights to the sky, and they're outside, but outside on a couch, Kevin Sorbo and his wife are cuddling, and the wife dies. She dies. And then the kids finish singing Holy Night, and the movie ends. And that's how the movie ends. She dies. But I guess now Kevin Sorbo is born again, so even though he's lost 2 family members to cancer, he's okay with it. It's funny, just before she dies in the movie, her can't-act children are, they're like, hey, Ma, I don't want you to die. And she's like, when I am in the other room, am I dead? And they're like, no. It's like, no, but I'm not there with you, but I can still care about you and watch over you. And I'm like, honey, death and object permanence are not the same thing. If you're dead, you're dead. If you're in the other room, you're in the other room. And even though I can't see you, I know you're in the other room. Death is not a lack... Us being afraid of death isn't because we don't have object permanence. Us being afraid of death is because you die, and you don't come back from that. I don't know. So, it's bad. Oh yeah, the other joke I liked in the movie is Kevin Sorbo quotes Shakespeare to his ex-wife. This is, he's already had the near-death experience, but he hasn't become born again yet. And the movie he's quoting, and then the Shakespeare thing he's quoting is about, like, loving a woman or whatever. And he's quoting Taming of the Shrew, so the wife says, like, I'm the shrew, and that one made me laugh. So I had 2 genuine laughs in this movie. Which is odd, because this movie tries to be funny and a lot of times and doesn't get it. Like, also during the same time frame, Kevin Sorbo is heavily drinking, he's not sure if there's an afterlife or not, and he can't sleep after he's seen his dead son. So he orders, like, all of these, like, mops and stuff on late-night infomercial, and he gets cases. And he keeps, like, trying to give these cases of mops to people, and it's a running joke in the movie, and it doesn't fucking work at all. Okay, so... I wouldn't call the movie itself morally reprehensible. Intellectually, it doesn't even really try to make that much of an intellectual argument. It just has him and the Bada Bing pastor, and that's about it as far as intellectual arguments go. Even like the debate at the beginning, it doesn't really deal with any arguments. It just kind of has Kevin Sorbo be an asshole and have the audience applaud him. But where it gets a bit morally reprehensible is we have that opening montage of all the stuff about the aftermath of, like, Muslim extremism. And the movie mentions ISIS way too much. At one point, the Daniel Roebuck character is like, I should print out t-shirts that say ISIS equals church. And basically, the movie's argument is that ISIS is evil, they proselytize with death, so the only way to combat that is to equally proselytize with our loving religion of Christianity. So it basically sets up polar opposites of evil Muslim ISIS and happy, good Christianity. And then the one, like, Muslim character, or explicitly Muslim character we have in the movie, toward the end of the movie, she's talking to Sean Hannity, because she, like, helped invent the whole app that goes on there. And she's like, I was born in Pakistan, and I was forced into an arranged marriage where the husband beat me, and then I came to America, and it was Jesus who saved me from that. So basically, this movie gives us 2 types of Muslim. ISIS and people who beat women. And the only way to escape the evils of Islam are to come to America and to become a Christian. Thank you, movie. Between this and between the portrayal of Muslims in God's Not Dead, I have to wonder, have anybody who's made these Christian movies ever met a Muslim? I've met Muslims. I'm not a fan of Islam, just like I'm not a fan of any religion. I think they're all fucking stupid and at worst evil. But there are plenty of really nice Muslims who have never beaten a person, who don't like ISIS. They're just regular people who happen to be Muslim. And it seems, according to this movie, and according to most of these Christian movies, the only Muslims who exist are evil, misogynist assholes. Basically, atheist, Muslim, anyone who's not an evangelical Protestant conservative is painted with the same brush. I don't know. So, look, I can be just as dismissive and paint Christians with a broad stroke. I have in the past. I do it still sometimes in humor. But I'll tell you something. A few months ago, I went through a really hard time in my life. And I have a friend who is very Christian. How Christian? They're at Liberty University right now, Christian. And they offered very supporting words. They were very nice. And they said, you know what? I'll pray for you. And, if sometimes Christians will say that and they're being condescending, like, I'll pray for you as a way of, like, ending the argument and trying to make themselves morally superior. And I'd respond with something like, have fun talking to yourself, dumbass. And, and generally, I don't believe prayer does anything. I think it's just it's people talking to themselves when they're powerless in a situation so that they feel less powerless and they think they're doing something. Fine. So when this friend said, I'll pray for you, I just took it in the manner that he meant. I don't believe prayer does anything, but basically that was this friend to me during a hard time in my life saying, hey, I care about you, I'm thinking about you, and I'm here for you. And I really appreciated that. So I'm capable of being friends and taking good wishes from a Christian, just like I'm capable of all this other stuff. I don't know if the makers of this film are capable of being friends with atheists. For all of their talk about love and compassion in this movie and other movies, I don't know. I'll still make fun of religion all the fucking time. I'm making fun of religion in this video. I'll have, Christian friends and myself will go back and forth and we'll do good-natured ribbing. It'll be like, whatever, believe your fairy tales, Christian. It'll be like, have fun rotting in hell, atheist. And we're just laugh and then whatever, and then we just talk about something else. But I feel like, despite how condescending humor and stuff I can do, I feel like the people who make these types of movies are way more mean-spirited than I am. I don't know. So, I'll say this. So, the movie is basically about being hurt that loved ones die, and that if you don't believe in an afterlife or religion, you'll be miserable. Now look, I'm an atheist, I'm miserable. I'm not miserable because I need Christianity. I'm miserable because I'm always miserable when I'm single, and most women do not like short, skinny, bald guys, so it's hard for me to meet women. That's why I'm miserable. So, but the movie says that, hey, all atheists are miserable, and apparently you can just completely shed alcoholism as long as you're baptized by an ex-mafioso in a knee-deep river. And so the only way for you to get comfort or to be happy is with religion. Now, people sometimes ask me, hey David, if religion is fake, why do so many people believe it even now? And my explanation is usually that if even people who are normally smart and normally normally have critical thinking skills will quarantine religion in a part of their brain where they don't suscept it to the same types of rigorous scrutiny that they would any other claim. But the reason it's quarantined is because they want to quarantine it. So take like when loved ones die. I've had loved ones die, humans and pets. And you know what? One of the main reasons religion exists now is because people are afraid to die. People don't want to die. They don't want their loved ones to die. And when their loved ones die, they want to believe that they're okay, that they're safe, that their sentience is still there, and that they'll be able to see them again. Fine, that's a normal human desire. They want that. And so believing in religion and believing in an afterlife allows them to think like, hey, I'll see them again. It's a comforting thought, and it helps people get through grief. That's one of the main reasons religion still exists right now. But here's the thing. Wanting to believe something does not make the thing you want to believe in true. Whether you want to believe in an afterlife, whether the idea of an afterlife gives you comfort, whether it makes you feel better, doesn't mean anything in the question of, objectively, in the real world, does an afterlife exist? As far as like a yes or no, maybe provable question, your desire for it to be true means nothing. All right, whether I want Molly Ringwald to be in love with me has nothing to do with the fact of the empirical question of, is Molly Ringwald in love with me? The answer being no, she's not. She has no idea who I am. She's also married to someone who's much more handsome than I am. So my desire has no effect on the empirical, objective reality around me. So, anyway, and as far as, like, is this movie inept? Yeah, I mean, I mentioned the bad special effects sequence. Kevin Sorbo directed this. He's not a good director. Most of the movie is directed in the static medium shots. Some of them, like, head-on. Like, the way I'm shooting this video right now, where it's a medium shot, I felt most of the frame, but not all of it, and I'm talking straight to you. This is basically how 90% of the movie is shot. Medium shots, and either the character is speaking directly to the camera or just askance off of it. Askance, so that kind of thing. And the movie's really poorly edited, where you'll have one shot where maybe the person will turn their head, and then it cuts back to like the coverage, the establishing shot, and the person hasn't turned their head yet, or their body's in a completely different, or in one shot they were reaching for a book, and in the next like cutaway shot, the book's still on the table. Like they didn't do a good job of editing the different takes together into a seamless scene. And I mentioned most of the actors in this movie aren't good. The dialogue is sometimes cringeworthy and sometimes just really bad. The intentional humor is not funny. Again, I laughed twice, once at a prop in the background and once at that Taming of the Shrew thing. The ending of the movie, completely like anticlimactic, like the wife dies. There's a shot of everyone in like Kevin Sorbo's backyard holding up their cell phone flashlights, and then it cuts to black, and there's a couple like quotes, and then credits roll, and Christian song plays. It's, aside from the jabs at Muslims, it's not really morally reprehensible. I wouldn't really even call it intellectually reprehensible, because the movie doesn't really try to make any actual arguments against atheism and for Christianity. It's more just, it's poorly made, it's poorly written, it's poorly acted, and actually the movie doesn't even try to make its argument. It's just basically, atheists are all condescending assholes and smarmy ass people, and then this one atheist has a near-death experience, and then he becomes super Christy. And then his wife dies, but he's okay with it because he'll see her later, and don't be afraid of death because heaven. And that's the movie. And I've just spent about half of the running time of the movie talking about this movie to you, which is enough. So, because I don't have enough time to write reviews, I decided to make this a video review, and I think this won't be it won't be like Dave's Faves where I do one every week, but occasionally if I see a really bad movie, and this was a really bad movie, I'd probably give this a D, just because it's not even so unintentionally funny that it's enjoyable. This isn't like God's Not Dead or The Case for Christ. I can sit around with a couple of friends, drink some alcohol, and enjoy making fun of that. This one, at times, this one's just bad for this, just plain bad. It's not even so bad it's funny. It's just bad. So it's not even enjoyable at that level. But when I see a really bad movie, I'll make one of these videos. And they don't have to necessarily be Christian movies. They're just bad movies, just bad enough that I want to rant at it for half an hour to 50 minutes on YouTube. So, Abhorrent Cinematic Garbage will be the name of this mini-series. So, anyway, that was Kevin Sorbo's Let There Be Light. I don't know. God's Not Dead 3 comes out in March, so that'll be fun. And I'm just glad I still see these movies for free. I'm just glad that I don't have to contribute any money to this. Yeah.